Welcome, everyone, to Season 6, Episode 8 of Solarpunk Presents. Today, I'm coming to you from Yorba Linda, California, just down the street from the Richard Nixon Presidential Library, to talk to Dr. Sam Myovich, retired history teacher and grassroots political campaigner, about the far-right's attempts to hijack local and county school boards and what people like Sam are trying to do about it. Before we begin, let me ask once again for your support. Join our Patreon, subscribe to our YouTube channel, click like, all that kind of stuff. Let me give you a little background now before we start the discussion. Across America, far-right extremists, really from North Carolina to California and everywhere in between, have been fighting to take over local school boards and reshape public education in their own interests. One place this has been playing out recently is in Orange County, California, a conservative bastion that has been growing more culturally, racially, and economically diverse over the last few decades. Now, I want to talk to someone who's been involved in the fight against this far-right takeover of local school boards, and what this has to do with the state of democracy in America, in the US of A today. So welcome, Sam.
Thank you.
And I'm really dying to hear about all of this because, as I told you earlier, from my perch over in Germany, I read a lot of US papers, and I've been reading that this is a problem. The far right has been hijacking school boards, and I don't fully know what their goal is, what their aim is. I can take a few guesses, and how dangerous this is, and really whether or not there's people who are waking up to it and trying to do something about it. Just to start off here, tell me what school boards do and why the far right is interested in controlling them.
School boards, not so much the county, but the local school boards are the most fundamental, foundational institution of democracy in society. In the American federal system, schools are largely the purview of state government. And so, the state writes ed code, the state sets curriculum. There is very little federal oversight into what states teach, as long as it all fits within the broader context of constitutional rights. And of course, public education is as historical as anything in the United States. That is free, secular, and universal public education. We've always had provisions for religious-based schools, but it was always understood that the state does not fund those. Because if you want to send your kid to a religious-based school, then that has to be organized through the auspices of the church organizations that sponsor them. And that's the way it should be. I don't have any problem with someone having a religious-based education. I just don't think a Muslim should have to pay for a Christian's education. I don't think a homosexual family should have to pay to send their kids to a school in which their lifestyle is demeaned. So, those are the issues. Now, getting back to your original question, why does the right want to change this? Because this is a fundamental change. This is a way of violating that fundamental premise that public education should be secular and open to all. Now, they have created a couple of national charter school movements. One of them is called locally it's called the Orange County Classical Academy, but its core concept derives from a Christian college in Michigan where Betty DeVos had come from, in that the Hillsdale Academy.
Hillsdale Academy is the K through 12 charter school that is related to Hillsdale College, which is a very, very, very conservative Christian college in Michigan.
And there's just been tons of money poured through that. And when you trace the money line, you get to a person that everybody in America should know. His name is Leonard Leo.
Oh my gosh, yes. Do Google that.
And Leonard Leo is the man singularly responsible for the extremist and despicable Supreme Court that now has ensured that Donald Trump was not held accountable for the crimes he committed, either on January 6th, for the crimes he committed in stealing classified documents and treating them as private property.
So what is the ultimate goal of this man? Is it a religious goal, or is it just a power goal, or?
My sense is that, their goal is to destroy public education as it has developed over centuries in this country, and to divert taxpayer money into the pockets of the sponsors of these private schools whose interests are primarily religious and private interests. It's the whole, they couldn't privatize Social Security, so what they're trying to do instead is privatize local education. And so they are imposing. So the county board in Orange County right now, where I live, the county board just last week went to Washington, D.C. to convince the members of Congress that are going to stay in power and are going to work with the Trump administration to divert more federal taxpayer money into the charter school movement. Because at the point at which you pour so much money into it, then the local public schools won't be able to compete. They're going to, try and pour so much money into them that more and more students and parents will choose to send their kids to these charter schools, and local control will be lost.
Charter schools, there's much less governmental oversight of them. What's the advantage for them aside from destroying public education? Charter schools are not held accountable to national standards, or they don't have to, their bookkeeping can be a bit more lax. What's the advantage for them?
The advantage is that, so in the Orange County case, they can impose, against the will of the local school board, they can impose a charter school and draw taxpayer money, that is the state taxpayer, in the case of California, state taxpayer money, away from the local school district and into that charter school, which is administered through the county board, not through the local board. And so it's a diversion of taxpayer funds, and wherever money goes, power goes. And who appoints the administrators of these boards, that is going to operate outside of local control. Again, you're undermining public education, but you're also undermining local democracy, small d democracy.
For those of you who are unfamiliar with the school boards and how they work in the US, local school board members who are elected make decisions for their local school district. This means things like allocating funds and other resources, hopefully equitably, between the different schools in the school district. They set budgets, they help guide curriculum development, they hire administrators, and they have oversight over the performance of teachers and of the various different schools. They also have the power to grant charters for the foundation of charter schools. But the county school board also has the power to grant charters, and they can force one on a school district whose school board members have said, no, we are not granting this charter. This is one way in which a county school board can hijack power away from the local school board and the people who voted for those people to run their school district.
Right. So the local control gets lost. Now, theoretically, they can, they'll be able to vote for the county board members, but that's a stretch. And, up until this point, nobody really knew much about what the county board did. But my friend Nancy, who I, worked on that campaign with, she saw this unfolding. And that's why she decided to run. That was her main motive, because she saw that the goal of the county board was to undermine local control of public education.
So what frightens you about that?
Loss of local control, the imposition of highly ideologically based curriculum. The Orange County Classical Academy is barely hidden Christian nationalist religious agenda. The science is bad. The methodology is bad.
Tell me about your experience working on these campaigns.
Well, it was eye-opening to me because I was a teacher, and the thing I loved about working in the district where I worked and working for the people I worked for is they respected teachers and they respected the classroom. And if I made a mistake, it was the principal who let me know and did so in a respectful way. And I think every teacher makes mistakes, and these principals have tough jobs, because if you say something in a classroom that a parent doesn't agree with or doesn't like, then they go straight to the principal. They usually go straight to the principal, and the principal with character is going to say, look, this parent complained about this. I won't tell you who the parent is, but here's the complaint. And then, sometimes I was wrong. Sometimes, I disagreed with the parent. And, that's going to happen, because if you're going to push students, issues are going to arise, and, we all make mistakes.
Well, I mean, it should be kind of an open communication. I mean, in a democratic system, teachers shouldn't be their authorities, but it's not in an authoritarian sense.
Going back to your original question, so I learned a lot about what the county board did. I learned a lot about Orange County. the area, it was a powerful exposure to the politics of education. But I think what they have been trying to do is traceable to what happened in Virginia with, can't think of the governor's name there, Youngkin, Glenn Youngkin. That's where the whole CRT ban emerged. That's where the whole, let's not call this homophobic, it's specifically anti-trans. I mean, this transphobia that has been placed front and center in our politics, which is all fear mongering. I don't want boys in the girls' bathroom. What a obscene way of framing this, and what an ignorant way of framing it. And again, anybody who studies fascism knows that the methodology of fascist politics is based on fear and anger, the emotions. Once you have it in the mind of people that this pervert principal or this pervert teacher wants this perverted man to shower in the girls' bathroom, that's a hard thing for the average person who doesn't know the dynamics of a school where, I am only aware of one trans student that I ever had, and the parents were completely supportive, and the principals were completely supportive and understanding. But we were able to navigate that one. But now in the current environment, I'm sure we would have been vilified. The transphobia really is the specific and contemptible theme that has, emerged. I think I heard today that the Republican Party spent $200 million on anti-trans ads during the presidential campaign, specifically targeting Kamala Harris.
I remember seeing one. I think it was on TV and being shocked by it because you could tell it was a funny color, so you could tell it was not an ad by the Democrats because they were trying to make it look kind of creepy. And she looks tiny in this ad, sitting next to what is very obviously a trans woman. Although the person is probably better described as, take a tall man with broad shoulders, very masculine features, shove him in a dress, put some lipstick on him. And there you have it. A fearmonger's perfectly hideous, absolutely ridiculous idea of a trans woman. And they've rigged it so this woman is like twice as big as Kamala Harris is. And, and your first instinct is like, wow, I didn't realize Kamala Harris is so tiny, right? And then
she's
you,
not.
right, exactly. And then you take a second, and then you go like, oh my goodness, okay, this is an attack ad, and this is propaganda, and this is wow. And if you aren't paying attention to that, then yeah, you could really get the wrong idea about the issue, which doesn't even need to be an issue. But it's frighteningly effective, and it's also an amazing distraction tactic.
Yes. And it's nothing new. I mean, if you're probably familiar with that great quote by the former Lutheran pastor Martin Niemöller, who lived through the Nazi era. And, he had that famous quote, first they came for the trade unionists or the communists. He had different versions of it. And then, and then finally when they came for me, there was no one left to stand up. And really, if he were to rewrite it today, and we should rewrite it today, first they came for the queer and the transgender, because that's what Nazism did, and that's what the Republican Party is doing right now.
So, I mean, so you're a scholar of fascism.
Well,
or
I've taught it for many years. I wouldn't call myself a scholar in the sense of like a Timothy Snyder or whatnot, but I've read their work and have monitored this, and yeah, and just watching this unfold, it's hard to get away from it. But yeah, I have taught upper division German history courses that look at it.
So as a historian and as a history teacher, are you just like kind of banging your head against the wall here?
Yes.
Because you're like, oh, I mean, it's that old cliche of those who don't know history or doomed to repeat it. But I mean, it seems like even people who know history are doomed to repeat it.
I was enough of an institutionalist with faith in the brilliance, and the American Constitution has a lot in it that is absolutely brilliant. My specific background, going back to the point at which I was aspiring to be a scholar but never got hired at the university level, was 18th century. So, that was my dissertation was based in the 18th century, and I've come to appreciate the American experiment and its uniqueness and genius for its time period. I had often felt that as bad as things might get in the United States, the institutions will hold. I no longer believe that.
They feel quite broken. I mean,
Yeah.
once you have a party that has figured out if you just blow through the norms,
Yeah.
it doesn't work anymore.
No,
So
and yeah, and just to tie the big picture to the specific, because I the reason I got involved in local politics is that, okay, here's where I see the local fascism. The guy that Nancy ran against, L. Ken Williams, is a fascist. I will put that label on him. Leander Blades is a fascist. She doesn't know what a fascist is, so she'll be resentful of the fact that I call her that. But I can explain what I mean by both in terms of her methods and her ideals. They are fascist ideals. I have a very simple definition of fascism, and fascism is the mass politics of the right. That is, it is tied to powerful, moneyed institutions. When Hitler consolidated power, who did he sit down with? He sat down with the industrialists, he sat down with the bankers, he sat down with the real estate moguls and the media moguls. Well, guess who got Trump into power? The same collection of, and the United States has always kind of teetered on this, its democratic element versus its plutocratic element. And, the Citizens United decision, I believe that was in 2008, definitely swung the power in favor of the plutocracy. And we are now dealing with the consequences of that. We don't know who of these 350 world billionaires that put tons of money into the Trump campaign and what their effect was. That's the defining element that we're dealing with here. And it's just shot its way through education. And Project 2025, the abolishing of the federal Department of Education, and then the broader undermining of education, that is the broad canvas on which these local political battles are playing out.
tell me about the fascist tactics of the school board member you're talking about.
The tactics are fear, anger. Hitler, said very clearly in Mein Kampf, the intelligence of the masses is very small, but the power of forgetting is enormous. And therefore, politics is about repeating the same things over and over again and focusing on emotions and never on reason. What played out on the local scale was the CRT ban, the anti-trans ideas. It's fear, fear, fear. So that's the specific tactic that jumps to my mind. But, in the background is, the local person we ran against in the more recent campaign. That is, so I've talked a lot about Nancy, but, I've worked more recently with Misty Jansen, and Misty was running for the local board. And she was running in a 2-to-1 Republican to Democrat area. And her opponent, Misty ran as a school board member should, as nonpartisan. Schools should not be partisan. She ran as a nonpartisan, but her opponent ran as a Republican in a Republican district, had the endorsement of every Republican, countywide, and even some of the congressional Republicans, federal congressional Republicans, and then oddly, everybody on the water board. I mentioned the water board because, one of the things I've learned in this process is Republicans, I hate to say, I should take my hat off to them, but Republicans have understood the importance of municipal politics in the way that Democrats have not. Water boards, especially in a place like Southern California, are very powerful institutions. When's the last time you heard a Democrat talk about, oh, I need to run for the water board? And it's the same with the school boards. And the Republicans had a very dedicated effort and funding, large scale funding. By the way, and who's that funding coming from? It's coming from the charter school industry, and it's coming from the homeschooling. Those are the people that are funding these campaigns. And then, of course, the county Republican Party, the Lincoln Club, I think it's called, and the California Policy Center. Those are the major donors to this extreme right, and it's a lot. They have a lot of money because they know, $700 billion a year goes from taxpayers into education, and if they can drain off enough of a portion of that, they can destroy public education and reap the benefits from it for their institutions. And those institutions are personal and they're religious.
So why is the right so much better coordinated than the left?
Money.
It's really just a question of money. And it's because the
Yep.
right is interested in money and power and the left is interested
And they
in
have it.
social issues? Or, okay.
and they have it. I mean, if you ever look at, I think there were something like 90 billionaires 30 years ago, and now there are like 700 billionaires. The destruction of the middle class, which really was traceable to the Reagan era, has really warped democracy. And then, of course, that Citizens United decision just opened up the possibilities for money to influence politics, and it's really overwhelming. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm bouncing back and forth between federal and local issues, and I don't know if that's a useful way to do it. But that's, to me, I don't separate them.
Yeah, it's all part and parcel, I think. So what should the left be spending its money on?
A few things I've had to think about, and I'm still in the process of, I've been involved in two campaigns. One of them started about 2 years ago, and then it came to an end in March, and I was exhausted. These things are emotionally and physically exhausting. But as soon as we realized that we did not prevail in that election, I get a call from someone I didn't know, and she says, I'm a retired teacher, and I'm disgusted with what's going on in our local school board, and I'm looking for retired teachers to help me. And so I had maybe a week off from the previous campaign and was drawn right into this one. And it's like, and I don't regret it at all. It's been an amazing journey, and we are building community. I think, the positive thing is the networks of people that have grown. And so, I get connected to you through this campaign. I don't know if we want to mention who's who's hosting our chat here, but she's one of the people that I got to know through the first campaign.
Christina jumping in to say, woo, big shout out here to my friend Chia, whom I have known since the third grade, who is helping out on some of the campaigns in support of the candidates who were running for school board against these far-right candidates who want to burn everything down and destroy public education.
And I've gotten to know her even better through the second campaign. So, and these are networks that are building. So I think, we have built something, even though the two campaigns failed. And by the way, my specific campaign failed, and that's a long story. Like I said, we were fighting a real uphill battle, very partisan area, 2-1 Republican, and we gave it a good run. I think the final votes are something like 47 to 53%.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Range. So yeah, we gave it a good run. But there were 3 seats that were at play, and we won the other 2. So, the local community spoke forcefully, and I think our hill was just a little bit steeper, maybe a little bit too steep for now. And there are other things that we could do to improve. But, getting back to your original question, what do we need to do? My personal, so people that I listen to a lot and whose opinions I respect, who have, national forums, but I don't know that a lot of people know them. One of them is Tom Hartman. He's got I listened to him on Sirius, but I got to know him initially through what was called Air America Radio, which was a brilliant AM radio station, looking to get progressive ideas to compete against the Rush Limbaughs and the extreme right wing. Air America died not because it wasn't popular. There were people on Air America who were getting better ratings than Rush Limbaugh and some of the other right-wing extreme people. Bain Capital, Mitt Romney's investment company, took it over and basically squeezed it out, and as part of his run for the presidency.
Christina here, jumping in with some detail on this. Bain Capital did not buy out Air America directly. What they obtained via a leveraged buyout was Clear Channel Communications, now known as iHeartMedia, which owned a lot of the radio station that carried Air America as part of their programming. After the buyout, Clear Channel removed Air America from its programming, driving Air America into bankruptcy.
And so Air America died a death, not a natural death, a very deliberate choking off of its resources because of the power of Bain Capital and Mitt Romney.
Wow.
I think we need,
If
So,
Mitt Romney also falls under the fascism umbrella, that's a scary world.
well, Mitt Romney, I would not call Mitt Romney a fascist. Because part of fascism is identified with what would you call it? In German, it's a Führerprinzip, the leader
Mm-hmm.
principle.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, there's one person that embodies the will of the people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Mitt Romney was not that. I mean, the
Okay.
Republicans would have liked him to have been that because he was so polished and so smooth and so reasonable. But no, you need a real jerk like Donald Trump to play that role of the Il Duce,
Mm-hmm.
the man who embodies the will of the people. Nobody's going to wear a "Daddy's coming home to the White House" T-shirt for Mitt Romney, but I've seen a lot of them here in Yorba Linda. "Daddy's coming home to the White House." It's like,
And it's specifically designed to make people's skin crawl, like the
yes,
opposition's skin
yeah,
crawl, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
humiliating and
yeah.
makes your gut twist up. They know that too.
Oh,
I think a lot of people enjoy that part of it.
yes, no, they sticking it to the libs.
It's so weird that they howl and howl and howl about their own voices being suppressed, but then, buying up a radio station and crushing it because it's the opposition,
Yeah.
and that's frightening.
But I think, we've got billionaires on our side too. And what I never understood, and here I may be wrong. I haven't done the studies on this, but everybody invests so much into social media and TikTok. And, my experience in both even the local campaigns, I'm not all that convinced that they're that important. I may be wrong about that. I'm not a political consultant. I don't follow these things. But what I do know is there are vast swaths of flyover America, that the Midwest and whatnot, where people listen to AM radio because they're driving trucks, they're driving long distances to get from point A to point B. They don't subscribe to Apple TV, they don't subscribe to Sirius radio. They listen to the AM and the FM radio. And what do you get on AM radio? Craziness, religious craziness, and political craziness. And, where is the Democratic Party on those people? Because we need to be part of the conversation. When you're only hearing one side of the conversation over and over again, and it's, especially the role of the Murdochs, it's like we have a media environment that is so warped, and you cannot have a constructive conversation with people who have bought that mindset.
It's a little tricky though, because it's asymmetric. Like one side is willing to lie and spew propaganda, and that is a recognized tactic that you associate with the right. Oh, you can't really do that if you're on the left, can you? I mean, doesn't that make you part of the right once you start using those tactics? And are we that kind of open to sensationalism and fear mongering? I mean, how do you do it? How do you fight that asymmetric battle?
Well, again, the people that I think of who are extremely talented, that most Americans don't know who they are. The fact that if I mention Joe Rogan, I think probably 9 people out of 10 will know who he is. I mentioned Tom Hartman, maybe two, maybe three will know who he is. John Fugelsang, brilliant, brilliant commentator, comedian, entertaining, just astute analyst. Stephanie Miller, Randy Rhodes. I can go on down the line. There are just so many gifted people who were part of Air America. But once Air America was undermined, they kind of diffused off into places where they're increasingly, difficult to find. There's talent there. It's just we're not investing in that talent the way we should. Like I say, there are a lot of brilliant, wealthy people. Whatever happened to all the money that Taylor Swift and John Legend and Oprah and on down the line? Where's all that money going? It didn't work. Maybe we need to rethink that.
What do you think people can do right now to help shore up democracy? Aside from start paying attention to local political races and get involved as maybe as candidates or as supporters of campaigns. So, is that a useful step for people to think about taking?
Right now, everybody should be very aware we're facing a crisis. I am not all that optimistic that we will see another free and fair election anytime soon. I'm deeply disturbed by the dysfunction, the dishonesty, the corruption of the Supreme Court, the Republican Party. We've already gone down that. So, but I think, let's work locally. First of all, I love what Gavin Newsom is doing right now. That is, we're preparing for an onslaught because they're going to go after the blue states even more intensively now than they did in the first Trump administration.
Christina jumping in with a just FYI, Gavin Newsom is currently the governor of California.
So there's an element of federalism that we all need to be aware of. And, I'm at the point where, let's tear down the administrative state. Let's get rid of the IRS, and the federal government can then fund itself like it did before the IRS was instituted in, I believe, 1913. We can figure out something, and it's going to be better for California, not worse for California. Right now, California, and let's keep in mind, California voted for Kamala 60%. And it would have been higher had she campaigned here, but it wasn't ever a state that was in play. And so I think let's promote this idea that California is the fifth largest economy in the world. Come after us and see what we do in response, because and keep saying that let's tear down the administrative state, because at this point I'm all for it, because I don't trust Donald Trump to run the administrative state. You want to tear down the IRS? That's fine. Figure out another way to fund the federal government. You want to tear down Social Security? Fine. Let's figure out another way to do, and we can do that in California. You want to tear down Medicare, Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act? Let's do that, because California can institute a Medicare for all plan, a single payer healthcare plan. We can do that. It would open its way to some experimentation. And so, the Ninth and 10th Amendments to the Constitution very much enforce this idea that if it's not a federal government power, it belongs to the states and the people.
It does put the Republicans in a little bit of a bind, because normally they're the states' rights people.
Exactly. And I think let's play this game now, because I don't trust the Trump administration to run any of the agencies in a reasonable and effective manner. So let's defund the Department of Justice. Let's defund. You're the environmentalist here, but it's just obscene, what they're doing with the environmental science. Oh, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for health. I mean,
the disruption there will be interesting, because I'm not sure Big Food will be all that happy with what happened. So, I mean, he's going to do bad things, but he might accidentally do some very interesting things at the same time.
Big Food and Big Pharma. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But and I hate that word interesting. Actually, it's not very interesting. It's perverse.
Okay.
Because it's absolutely perverse, because Big Pharma is perverse and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is perverse. And so, to let them go at it and play out their contradictions is just a disgusting and completely useless exercise that is not going to benefit anybody in the long run. Neither of them have the interest of the public in mind.
Yeah, I know that is also true. In your opinion, as a historian or just as a person, why haven't we been out on the streets screaming about all of this?
Well, you remember when Trump was elected in 2016, there was a lot of people out in the street screaming, there was the pink wool hats and all that. And, what good did it do? I think a lot of us are angry and we're internalized, and how we focus that anger, because there's a lot of energy, but we just don't know yet what the next step is. And I think, I know personally, it's like, I want to take a couple steps back and I'm not withdrawing. I just want to get a sense for what's next. Where can I work? How can I work? And, kind of going back to one of your earlier questions, yes, we need to focus on local campaigns, and we need to focus now. We need to start. All right. So getting back to local politics, we have a horrible, the only check on the power of the county board of education was the county superintendent, who, tragically is dying of cancer and had to resign. And of course, the corrupt board then gets to appoint his provisional replacement. And this guy's awful.
Well, and as I recall, I think our mutual friend was telling me that this was done in a very shady manner.
Well, I don't know how shady it was. I mean, these guys are upfront about who they are and what they want, and so they picked a superintendent that was completely aligned with their extremist agenda.
Oh, or the vote, somehow the vote was done at a time when no one else could, the opposition couldn't show up, or
You may be thinking about the local board. I'm talking about the county board.
okay.
Yeah, so yeah, what they did at the local board at the last board meeting was despicable. And just to clarify that, so they have this. So the local superintendent for the Placentia Yorba Linda, not Orange County, but the Placentia Yorba Linda School Board. The local superintendent, since the board has changed now, and it's a 3-2 majority that will likely try and get rid of this superintendent because they are at-will employees, and this superintendent has been a disaster. But for the extremists, he's been their man. He has gone about, destroying, wasting money and destroying local schools. That's what he's done. And I'll say that without fear of retribution because we have the receipts. And we will have more receipts soon now that the new school board is in, and they'll do a forensic audit of the guy, and we'll know exactly where this money has been wasted. So this 3-2 current extremist board majority, which has now been flipped, and it will flip next month, they decided, oh, you can't fire this guy unless you have a 4-1 or 5-0 supermajority. That was the shenanigans.
Okay.
So a 3-2 vote authorizing a 4-1-5-0 vote. It's Orwellian. It's beyond Orwellian. And it's what they've done. And they said, well, we've done it for previous superintendents, but the circumstances and the details were not at all consistent with that. It's another part of their dishonesty.
Yeah, it's shameless.
It's shameless. Yeah.
And it's, before the last couple of years, you just didn't realize how much shame was in them. And the desire to be respectable and fair was actually a really key part, and to recognize norms and abide by them was a really key part of our politics. And all the unwritten rules actually need to be written,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is hard.
The power they have, and it's the power of money, and it's the power of their think tanks, and it's the power of their legal scholars, and it's the power of the corrupt federal judges and now Supreme Court judges. It makes feel almost impossible to fight against, but we have to. And like I said, we won locally, and I think if we continue to fight, and if this whole federalist idea where the states will set up firewalls against fascism, because that's what I consider it, firewalls against fascism, the state's authority here will work. The other thing I'm working on right now is, there's a very close congressional race, and every member of the House right now is important. So we have a really close one here in Orange County with Derek Tran running against Michelle Steele. And so I've spent a lot of time in the last 3 weeks curing ballots, that is going out and making sure that people who voted for Tran make sure their vote counts because their signature on their ballot didn't match the signature on their registration form.
Oh, that's so subjective as well.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And Republicans will challenge everything.
Christina jumping in here with an update. Derek Tran ended up beating Michelle Steele by a few hundred votes, flipping California's 45th district, and therefore that seat in the U.S. House of Representatives from red to blue, or in other words, from Republican to Democrat. So do you think the Democrats are kind of Machiavellian enough to fight back and to like play the games with the water board like you were talking about? Do Democrats have it in them to play that way?
I hope so. To me, what's really important right now is that we start anticipating the 2026 elections. We need candidates now. Like one of the issues with the candidate I supported most recently, Misty, she got in very late because, the politics are nasty. And in order for somebody to stand up and do it, I respect anybody who's willing to do it because somebody like her opponent is just a fundamentally cruel person. She did things on Facebook, said horrible things about her, said nasty things about her and her supporters. And it is grueling. And this is a woman who works full time. I mean, the person I supported, Misty, she works full time. She's raising kids. She has a life. And then to have to kind of devote herself to standing up to her opponent who is I think she's still in her 40s, is retired on medical leave because she hurt her back, supposedly as a police officer in the Downey Police Force, and is now on some kind of medical leave. I don't know if it was done through their local police or through workers' comp, but she makes like $72,000 a year to sit on the school board and do nothing. In the meantime, she rides horses, sore back, but she can ride horses, sore back, but she can run 5K races and win them. It's just,
Wow, that is shameless. That
it
also
is.
fearless, you
Yeah,
know?
but I mean, it's the same with Trump. Trump is about, my bottom line on what's happened here recently is we are no longer a nation of law. How is Trump not going to ever be held accountable for January 6th? How is Trump not ever going to be held accountable for classified documents? How is Trump not ever going to be held accountable for the election fraud and the felony convictions he faced in the state of New York? How is Trump not going to be held accountable for what even happened in the state of Georgia with the effort to overturn those elections and the electors? Now, some of that's going to play out in state courts, and hopefully it will. But there we are no longer a nation of law because some people are above it, and that includes the woman we ran against, the extremists that won our local race. She's never been held accountable for law. What makes her think that anybody's going to ever hold her accountable for law? I hope that changes. She's facing a lot of legal actions here in near future because the political's over. We kind of won the political because we got the 2 seats we needed to flip the board. And now it's a legal battle, and the legal battle is going to play out through ed code and state law and a bunch of stuff that I'm not well versed in, but I know a lot of people who are and who are going to be pushing that. And I hope that she spends a lot of time giving depositions and testimony and defending herself and ultimately paying for what the harm she's caused to the district and to the people who work for it.
So I guess all of this is possible because the right has managed to put in place a network of people on all levels of government, and has this whole network of people in the private sphere, and they are all acting in a coordinated fashion towards a common goal.
Yes.
And so we need to pick up our game and do a little bit of the same and realize that our common goal here is preserving democracy and freedom on a very big level. So we do all need to start participating on all levels of democracy here and not leave it to professional politicians.
Yes, and the Democratic Party, I mean, at, at, at first I resisted getting in that circular firing squad and talk about all the mistakes that Kamala Harris made and the Democratic Party made, and I was reluctant to do that, but I'm kind of no, let's look at some of this because the Democratic Party does for the most inane reasons imaginable. Donald Trump did pose himself as the man of the people. And again, I don't want to be part of the circular firing squad, but I will say this: Kamala Harris spent a lot of time with Liz Cheney, and she didn't spend much time with Bernie Sanders. Uh, and and I say that's emblematic, that's symbolic. It's there are other, on the local scale, the Democratic Party made some mistakes here that cost us in some of the local races as well. And a lot of that has to do with the sometimes not constructive role of unions in the Democratic Party.
Well, it does feel like, and I hesitate to call the Democratic Party a left party at this point because they seem to me to be a center-right party at this point.
Yes.
But it does feel like all over the world, just to make a blanket statement, the left has forgotten it is the party of the working people. You
Yes.
see this in Germany,
Yep.
and so these people now and they see that all the political parties are supporting the billionaires and supporting this increasing income inequality and wealth inequality and all of this. So why should they keep voting for the left parties when the left parties have let them down? I don't condone it, and I don't always think it's the case, but you can understand a little bit of the protest vote going toward the far right. Because if the system isn't working for them, you're gonna blow it up. And that's the way to play. It's it's dancing with the devil, but you're gonna blow it up by giving your vote to the far right.
And there's a part of me that says, yeah, let it fall apart and we can rebuild it.
It's terrifying, though. That could take 100 years or never.
The historian in me says destruction is easy, building is hard, and I don't want my grandkids to have to go through whatever version of a civil war would be necessary to address that.
I don't think any of us would want to go through that. And let's hope it doesn't come to that. Okay. On that note, I will say thank you for talking with me today. This has been fun and very educational, and I feel fired up now. And I hope all of our listeners will think about getting involved in whatever way they can, because we are in an existential fight for our democracies right now. And we all need to be out there on the front line in whatever capacity we can be.
Well, thank you for all you do. And it's a pleasure talking to you.
And that's a wrap for this week. I hope that inspires you all to get out there and start fighting the good fight, or, to keep fighting the good fight. Thank you for listening to Solarpunk Presents, a podcast hosted and produced by Ariel, Kroon, and Christina de la Rocha.
The audio for this episode was recorded in part on the traditional territory of the neutral Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples.
And in Germany. The opening and closing music for this podcast is Water Cooler Gang by Monkey Warhol, available for use under the Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 International License.
Don't forget to support us on Patreon at patreon.com/solarpunkpresents.
Every little bit helps us keep bringing you discussions and interviews.
Until the next episode, keep dreaming.
And stay solarpunk.